So, I just finished Final Fantasy 16, and wow, what a game. Welcome everybody. This is a follow-up to a previous video I made. In that video, after experiencing the FF16 demo, I was hyped for a new single-player Final Fantasy to be good again. After Final Fantasy X, single-player Final Fantasy games have been rough. And FF10 came out in 2001, so it's been a very long time. Now, I know what some of you might bring up. What about Final Fantasy XIV or the Final Fantasy VII Remake games? Yes, FF14 is fantastic, but it's an MMORPG. FF7 Remake, excluding the, nomorisms, was pretty good. I can't speak on Rebirth though, I don't have a PS5. What I'm talking about here is a new Final Fantasy that isn't an MMO or a remake. With that out of the way, let's get down to business. I judge Final Fantasy games, or hell, any JRPG, based on three things I call the Holy Trinity: story, gameplay, and music. In my opinion, after FF10, there hasn't been a single-player Final Fantasy that has fulfilled and excelled in the Holy Trinity until now. Yeah, that's right. FF16 has a good story, great gameplay, and exceptional music. Meaning for me, this is a proper return to form for Final Fantasy. Let's start with the gameplay. The gameplay in FF16 is fully action-based, which might turn a few people off. Me though? I've never been a turn-based versus action-based combat sort of guy. As long as the gameplay is good, I'm satisfied. And the combat in 16 is good. Real good actually. Apparently the combat director of this game is also the guy for Devil May Cry. Maybe one day I'll have to try out that series. Anyways, back on track here. The mix of sword swinging and magic abilities is excellent. It's a fair amount of fun to constantly switch between icons in battle. If I had to give any criticism to the combat though, it would be that some enemies are just a bit too spongy and take too many hits to kill. I'm excluding boss battles in that statement. Speaking of boss battles though, holy man, the boss battles in FF16 are incredible, especially the icon fights. Seriously, the icon fights in this game alone are enough to warrant playing this game. Truly some of the best video game cinema I've ever seen. I'll only show the Ifrit vs Phoenix footage from the demo, because I really don't want to spoil some of the really epic fights that are experienced later on in the game. Some people might say those icon fights are just fan service, and to some extent I would agree, but I don't care. I got a lot of joy from those fights, being someone who played a lot of Final Fantasy in their childhood. Seeing those classic summons, the best they have ever looked, duking it out was a hell of a drug. I guess one other thing I gotta criticize the gameplay for is that sometimes there are just too many effects on screen, and it's hard to see what's going on. Final Fantasy XIV also had that problem, and since it's the same development studio who made this, I can't say I'm surprised. Overall, the gameplay for me in 16 gets an 8 out of 10. Moving on to the story. The story in 16 is good, but I certainly had some problems with it. I mentioned earlier that 16 is made by the same studio as 14, and therein lies some of the problems I have with its story. There is a lot of FF14 DNA in this game, especially with the pacing and execution of the story. There were certainly a fair amount of times in the game where it felt like it was dragging, just like in 14. Although it's a lot more forgivable in an MMO because of all the social interactions. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no stranger to slow pacing in games. I'm a fan of 14 and Trails after all. So that aspect doesn't drag down my score too harshly for the game's story. While overall I was satisfied with the story, and I do believe it accomplished most of what it set out to do, there were a fair amount of moments that just gave me Star Wars Episode 8 vibes. I don't know how to describe it clearly, but I found myself saying, well, that was a letdown, or wait, really? Etc. a few times. So I suppose the sometimes slow pacing and those moments I spoke of earlier in combination result in me scoring the game's story a 7 out of 10. Now I gotta mention this, I don't operate on the pH scale of IGN when giving scores. A 7 is not the middle point, a 5 is. So the story is still something I view as 2 notches above average, which is pretty good. Oh yeah, I also gotta mention the main character, Clive. He was a very refreshing protagonist for the Final Fantasy series. Music time. Now the music in 16 is excellent, which should not be a surprise for anyone who has played 14. Soken is an extremely talented man at composing music. If you love the music in 14, you will also love the music in 16. Just in case not to anger Square-Enix, I won't play any of the music from 16 in this video. I will say the music had a wide and impressive variety that always fit the situations they were in. Overall, I give the music score in this game a 9 out of 10. So, with my Holy Trinity scoring system, the story is a 7 out of 10, the gameplay is an 8 out of 10, and the music is a 9 out of 10, which overall means Final Fantasy 16 to me is an 8 out of 10. I could not be happier. A new single-player Final Fantasy that is a great game. Please, Square Enix, I beg of you, don't make us wait 2 decades again for a great single-player Final Fantasy game. And also, please don't make it a console exclusive for a year. Start it off the rip being multi-platform. I assure you, the game will sell a lot more copies that way. Alright, I think that's all I got for now, and so, if you've made it this far, thanks for watching. I'll see you around, have a good one, peace.